The Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome back to Liberty Mail. I'm Katie Kenline.
And I'm Ashby Abernathy.
And we are in the basement studio with Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College. And we're really excited to bring you this episode today. We're talking about the Reagan movie, which we've both seen. But we're going to be reviewing some reviews because something crazy has happened with the Reagan movie that we should remind people is based on the book by our very own Dr. Paul Kengor called Reagan the Crusader.
So what's interesting about this movie is that the Reagan movie has the largest gap between critic scores and audience reviews. The audience reviews are somewhere at 98%, and the critic reviews have it at 17%.
Yeah, that's on Rotten Tomatoes. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy. For those of you who aren't familiar, Rotten Tomatoes internet reviews of movies, and I think hold a lot of weight with young people and people across all ages. But it's really crazy, the gap of reviewers to people who saw it, audience members, loved it, 98%. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is, especially because it really demonstrates the bias in Hollywood towards favoring more liberal-leaning movies. And when a movie comes out that doesn't meet that agenda, it's pretty obvious whenever the people review it and say that it's a good movie, and the critics are still putting it all the way down at 17%.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Kengor talked about how hard it was to have this movie made and how it took them. This was a process of over 20 years that they worked on this. And really, one of the coolest things was as soon as they got Dennis Quaid on board, that was a big deal for them. And I think I think he did an incredible job.
No, I completely agree. I mean, honestly, during the movie, I found it hard to distinguish Dennis Quaid from Ronald Reagan. And some parts where it's just like, oh, that's just Ronald Reagan.
Yes, and he did the voice just incredibly.
The mannerisms and everything was to a T of watching old Reagan footage, comparing it to how Dennis Quaid reacts.
Yeah.
Dennis Quaid was Ronald Reagan in the movie.
Yes. No, it's incredible. And we want to remind everybody right now, look at theaters near you just to see. Reagan is still in theaters, and we'd love for you to see it before it comes out of theaters. It's been really fun to see and know that it's all connected back to Grove City and Dr. Kengor. We've heard him talk about this movie and just how special it was. He was out in Hollywood. You can see all kinds of, we have like a vlog, a little mini vlog of when the Kengor family went out to Hollywood. That's on our social media. And then we have a review or an interview I did with Dr. Kengor about the process of making the movie. But today we're talking about, it's been in theaters for about a month, and today we're talking about some reviews. And so we have our producer in studios has brought up, we have some of the Rotten Tomatoes reviews that we're going to talk about. So we're ready whenever you are, and we'll read them to you here. The first one is Steven Silver says, by the numbers, but succeeds in its primary objective to provide fan service for the aging cohort of Reagan partisans, inviting them to enjoy his catchphrases, much the way they might cheer for Rocky or Iron Man. He gave this a 2 out of 5, and these are like the film critics for this site. Okay, Ashby, initial thoughts?
I mean, the movie is very pro Ronald Reagan, but Ronald Reagan was also a good president, so I mean that's a pretty obvious take. And Steven Silver rated it 2 out of 5, which was interesting to me. So yeah. No, I think here's the thing: Reagan was an incredibly popular president, and I think one of the most incredible things, it says for an aging cohort of Reagan partisans. So we sat Grove City College downtown at the Guthrie Theater with a lot of college students. Was a sold out, and this is Grove City College, but I think, dare I say, Reagan might be the president that all of us, that we want. The kind, grandfatherly, warm-hearted, just doing good for the American people president. I think it's not just for, my grandparents did go see the movie, and they loved it. But I think it's not just for people who remember when Reagan was president. No, not at all. And it's definitely presenting it in a more mainstream media to a younger audience. I mean, that's why you'd make a movie, is to have people see it. So it's not just catered to an older population, but also to a younger population going to go see it in movies. Just like you said, Grove City students going to go see it.
Yeah. And I also would say it's not super partisan. There are a lot of moments there. I would say it's not a Republican movie. And we can see it was produced in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. That's the...
So this review is from Paul Renfro, and he writes, like Reagan the actor and Reagan the president, Reagan the new movie has strained a relationship with reality. Katie, what do you think about that?
I think that something we've talked about is that the movie doesn't just have this green glass, everything's so great. The movie includes large protests about the AIDS epidemic and a lot of footage really blaming President Reagan. Includes Iran-Contra. It includes all kinds of anti-war protesters. It does say, in 1984, Reagan won every single state against Minnesota. Incredibly popular president. That was the reality. But just because that electoral college result was the case, they didn't stray away from. They showed protesters and opposition. They didn't make it look like he had no opposition.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are any other parts that. I mean, he is larger than life. He has an iconic presidency. I would say that's the reality.
Yeah, and then you're also one thing is it's a 2-hour movie. You're not going to fit everything that happened in the presidency into the movie.
Exactly.
So there is some things that are going to be left out. But at the same time, like, it does do a pretty fair coverage of the Reagan presidency in that 2-hour time slot. I mean, he was an incredibly popular president, like you said, and did have the largest electoral college win in his time as president. So, yeah.
Well, and I think one of the other interesting things is, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, it goes all the way back to his time in Hollywood and actually focuses a lot on his formative years as a leader in Hollywood.
In the Screen Actors Guild.
Screen Actors Guild. And that is something that, it's more than just his presidency. It talks all about that leadership too. And there's just a lot of things that from his public life when he gets to the Oval Office that weren't included in the movie. I think there were parts that I would have loved to. Obviously, we have many iconic parts, but there's also when the Challenger explosion happened. I think his speech when he went on TV after that is very, very famous. That wasn't in the movie. There are other parts too that weren't in the movie. Good and bad parts, but yeah, no, it's just it's an interesting take we got. Okay. Oh, this is good. Okay. From Vincent Mancini. The Reagan movie, quote, lets Grandpa relive all his favorite sound bites with a score C-. What do you think?
I mean, I think there's a reason why Reagan was so popular, and it was because of his quick soundbite things. I mean, the man was incredibly quick on his feet. I mean, after his assassination attempt, he's giving a speech and a balloon pops and he goes, "Oh, you missed me." Like, that's iconic. Him saying he's not going to let his opponent's youth and inexperience he won't exploit that for political gain. That's iconic. I mean, I don't see how you could not include that in a movie because it's something that would seem like it's in a movie script. I mean, and he came up with it off the top of his head. Like, it's incredible.
And I mean, I don't know, let's look at all the other recent presidents that they could make movies about. And there aren't that many favorite sound bites, I think, that people out there, left or right, have of, let's say, President Bill Clinton. He has a pretty iconic one soundbite that doesn't look too well for him, like doesn't go over too well for him. I think President Reagan, I don't know, we're in a very contentious election cycle. We're in a time where I think we'd say there's really great division. We know that not one candidate or the other is going to be as popular. For sure, definitely Harris or Trump are not going to win every single state but one. And I think that, maybe right now, I think it's a great camaraderie to sit in the movie theater and just say, wow, what a great man that we all can respect. And yeah, I think there is some reliving of some quote unquote glory days, but it's just a beautiful, I think it makes you remember why. I think for me, it's like, this is why I do like politics and do like government. Yeah.
there is someone out there who can do it professionally and not, go crazy off the deep end or anything.
Yeah.
And that goes for both sides today. But yeah, someone who commands a lot more respect with the way they live their life and the way they ran for politics. And Ronald Reagan is a great example of that.
Yeah. So I would say, I think it's okay to relive a little bit, and you can relive it in theaters. We're just going to keep plugging that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Ooh. This one's from Robert Koiger.
So it's a 1 out of 5.
Yikes. It would be too easy to rip apart this film based on its perception of Ron Reagan and its cringe conservative propaganda tone. There is no need to do so because the direction and screenplay are inept, regardless of message or intent.
Ooh. Well, I'm gonna just say, I think we are a little biased. We have a screenplay and a script essentially written from Dr. Ken Gore. But here's the thing: we're talking this movie again. For those of you who haven't seen it, it is told, really narrated from the perspective of a KGB agent, played by Jon Voight, very famously outspoken conservative actor in Hollywood. And he is in the present day talking about what the Soviets saw in Reagan that scared them, that
was a threat to the Soviets, yeah.
And he narrates throughout Reagan's entire life really why Reagan was the crusader, and really shows the fall of the Soviet Union. And here's the thing. The Soviet Union, we know, used a tremendous amount of propaganda. This movie very realistically shows the fall of the Soviet Union. It's not propaganda. It's real. It happened. The Soviet Union absolutely was crippled. Like, by the end of, I'm born in 2002. We come into a new era. The Soviet Union no longer exists. And I would say most historians will tell you that's thanks to Ronald Reagan, his aggressive push against communism. And sure, now we can say, it's all this propaganda and all these lies about communism, but we're not living in that era anymore, thanks to people who really were trying to expose the evil and the lies of communism in the 20th century. I don't know. What do you think?
I think a lot of these critics just went in expecting it to be... Have you seen the movie Vice about Dick Cheney?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is very negative of Dick Cheney, and you can say if that's warranted or not. And I think a lot of them went in hoping it would be like that, something that would tear down Ronald Reagan and just be a hit piece, which would be very, very much something that would come out of Hollywood nowadays, and it wasn't that. So them going in and seeing that it's actually pro a president that was very popular didn't go over well for him. So I think it's just having a very different expectation of something that would come out of Hollywood. So
yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense that they thought they were coming in to see. They wanted a hit piece on Reagan. They wanted to expose all the bad parts of his presidency. And when they got the personal or more humanized side, again, a lot of it's his life before he was president. A lot of it's his growing up. A lot of it's his relationship with his wife that's just beautiful. And it's so sweet in the movie. That's like my favorite part. Just his relationship with Nancy and the end of his life, riding off into the sunset, literally, when he's passing away from Alzheimer's. I don't know. And I would be careful with the use of cringe conservative, because I think that, I don't know what your thoughts are. I think it's an incredibly well done movie that was not your cheesy, I don't know. I think they think it either needs to be it's either a hit piece that's really critical and makes him look terrible, or it's like, it's so cringy and it just is so happy.
The goal of a movie is to make a good movie and make the audience feel good. And I think Reagan accomplished that very well. If you went in watching, 98% from the audience scores pretty much proves that.
Yep.
So just these critics going in and they're like, oh, well, it was just propaganda. None of that actually happened, when in reality it was a very accurate movie and portrayal of his presidency and his life before that. So yeah, I don't think that cringe conservative is warranted on that.
Yeah, it tugs at your heartstrings. It shows the relationship. It shows him growing up, his relationship with his mom, how hard his life was as a child. But I mean, you gotta include. Yes, it's gonna tug at your it's affects your emotions, but that's his life. This is not a documentary.
Yeah,
I think is the. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, this one's from Tanner Gordon. Even at a preponderous 135 minutes, director Sean McNamara's ineptly made effort fails to provide any actual insight into its subject's life. Instead of opting for a bluntly one-sided hagiography, which depicts Reagan as a near godlike figure.
Whew. Wow. That's very, I would say that's very loaded in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of these, I feel like these reviews are trying to cram as much criticism as possible into one sentence.
Yeah.
I would say. Okay, here's let's go back to fails to provide any actual insight into its subject's life. I learned I learned so much that I did not know about Reagan before watching this movie. Very poignant part where I think many of us knew that Reagan was a lifeguard, but then we have, which Dr. Kengor talked in the podcast we did about some more of the research about Reagan on the football team, and at the time where schools were just being integrated, and a young Reagan in high school, his relationship with 2 black players on his team, things that Dr. Kengor did research on that I had never learned before, and just how positive that was. Reagan's father, who was an alcoholic, and a very poignant part of very young Reagan dragging his father into the house through the snow. I mean, I'd say all of the Hollywood things, I had no idea that there was this union versus just all like the violence that was going on in Hollywood at the time. I think it was showing how formative that was for Reagan, and then really helped inform, this is how he got to the presidency. I mean, I think I kind of thought, he's an actor, then he became governor, and because he was so popular, and then he just became president. I would say it provides a lot of insight. into his life. It shows his first marriage. Yeah.
It definitely does give plenty of insight into his life, especially before that. I mean, things that would go into making him into be one of the best presidents in American history. Godlike figure is definitely a reach, because I think it does portray plenty of the negative sides, like we've already said. Yeah, I don't really have much more on that.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I would say that everyone has a favorite president. Everyone has a favorite leader. It's okay if you say, Reagan is kind of my political hero. Yes, we need to be careful, especially as Christians, to not elevate people to a level above like where they actually are. But to say, for many, many people, again, you can see that in the Electoral College result, in the election results from 1984. Many, many people regarded him as a hero and as someone that they admired. And I don't think that is a bad thing, to really admire someone's character, especially as a president.
And I think it definitely warrants making a movie about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Travis Hobson, original score, 1 out of 5. Reagan is a lot like the Republican Party now. Inflated self-importance and terminally unserious.
That is very interesting. I don't think the movie took an unserious tone at all. I think it was very serious, especially narrating it from the Soviets' perspective, which was an interesting way to do a movie on Reagan, and it makes sense. Yeah, I don't think there was very many things that were taken unseriously in the movie. The most funny bits were just his comments. I mean, when he's going in for surgery after he gets shot, he says, I hope none of you are Democrats, whenever he says that. And they all say, we're all Republicans today. I don't think that was unserious. I thought it was funny, but I don't think it took away from the seriousness of the movie. And that was something he actually said.
I mean, I think, again, we're talking about a movie and not a documentary. I don't know if they wanted to say... The whole unseriousness part is like, did they want the movie to be connected to today and say, if you don't, like at the end, make sure you're registered to vote and that you're registered for this part. Like, I don't know what the seriousness, it is supposed to be lighthearted. And I do think that again, going back to how popular this president was. And I know this is what Dr. Ken Gore has talked about so much, and how this movie's for everybody, regardless of your party, because this is an iconic leader. Just the inflated self-importance. It was really, I think this is where it's different than the Republican Party today. I would say that the party today is struggling on a lot of fronts. I think that Reagan didn't, I don't know if this is controversial, Reagan didn't almost need the party, like he didn't need the institution in the way that he was a leader and wanted to serve, and the whole time for choosing, and this is as a communal thing we're going to do. I think that he was really significant and really important, and I don't think the movie is, and it is inflated at all.
And I think even despite it coming out during an election year, which I know they didn't originally want to do, Dennis Quaid said that in an interview that it was supposed to come out before election season. But I don't think the movie has a lot of ties to the modern Republican Party now. Like, I don't think at any point was it overinflating the Republican Party, being like, oh, you need to be a Republican. I think it was more so just portraying Ronald Reagan and his thought processes and the way that he conducted himself.
Yeah, I think the movie talks very, very little about policies, except for, there's really nothing in there about abortion. There's really nothing in there about many other issues, except for different things about war, and it's all about communism.
Yeah. There's some spots where it mentions it, but it's very, very brief. Like Reagan's trickle-down economics is a very brief comment in the movie, but it doesn't overly harp on Republican policies in the day. So
it's interesting. Yeah.
This one from Oscar Goff. Though its years spent in development hell likely precluded the possibility that it has the artificial sheen of generative AI, as if someone fed reverent biopic of Ronald Reagan into an algorithm.
I think an overall trend that we've got here is that many of these critics would really not like to think about how popular Reagan was in the time he was president. I don't know if they think, do they think if we take a poll today, this is to go back to like the modern conservative movement and everything, sure, he might not be as popular today than he was when he was president, but at the height of his presidency, again, we're just saying this over and over, they're like forgetting that reverence is actually probably a word that many people would have, like, that's how people felt about the Reagan Revolution. It is called the Reagan Revolution. And yeah, I don't know, the artificial sheen of generative AI, saying that that it was just plugged into an algorithm. Here's the thing. I think Dr. Ken Gore would be very offended for all the many, many years of research he did for this book and this movie. But I would say, this is like from an acting perspective, I loved Penelope Ann Miller as Nancy Reagan. Just was so realistic, down to earth, almost uncanny, like Nancy. And maybe they're saying like they looked too much, where they were too much acting the part. They did too well, that it looked like AI. But I think that there are some really heartfelt. It was like some of these actors really had heartfelt performances, and I think people will always be frustrated by, none of these reviews have talked about kind of some of the Christian themes, but maybe this is part of what frustrated this reviewer is just the frequent use of God's plan and a calling on your life and prayer. Shows Reagan give his life to Christ and get baptized. Shows Reagan reciting scripture in church, 2 Chronicles 7:14, which is a very classic revival verse. Then one of my favorite parts is he gets sworn in on the Bible, open to, and I need to ask Dr. Ken Gore if this is like really historically accurate, because I thought it was incredible. I was like crying. He gets sworn in, the movie shows, on the Bible, open to 2 Chronicles 7:14, where he's highlighted that verse, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, it goes on and turn from their wicked ways, then I will heal their land. Open to that, and he's sworn in on, and he's written on the side, a great prayer for our nation. So again, I think people will dislike those themes and those throughout the movie.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the gender of AI thing is very funny because I think we've all seen the products of AI, and I don't think AI could make a movie like that.
Yeah.
So.
No, and the developmental hell. I mean, if you want to hear some more about this, you can listen to our, the interview with Dr. Kegor. I think he'd say it was all well worth it. He would also say that much of that was because of liberal leftist Hollywood and how long it took to get people on board. But that's definitely interesting. I'd love to have Dr. Kegor react to something.
Oh yeah, definitely. This one from Joe Fryer. Fans of Reagan will like it. Fans of history, not so much. I think you can just look at the history, even just pulling up Ronald Reagan's Wikipedia page, and see that there's nothing in that movie that really didn't happen. There might be some artistic liberties with just some minor things to fill in the gaps, but I don't think much of it is doctored at all. Yeah.
Oh, and we should say the score for this is given a 2 out of 4. Yeah, I would say, here's the thing. The conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, the movie does go back to the Kennedy era. It goes back. It briefly talks about Cuban Missile Crisis, goes through the different leaders in the Soviet Union. That part is a little funny because of how quickly many of them were dying. That's one little funny part in the movie where it goes through very quickly all the leaders. But I mean, again, I think my response to this is you can't fit. This is one. It's not a Ken Burns documentary where we're talking about the conflict between Soviet Union and the United States. I'm sure that yes, there are many things that were left out for time. But again, things that portray Reagan in a good light and in a bad light.
Yeah, and I'd also say, like, I can see, I can't really see where he's coming from with this, but one of the things in the movie that I know a lot of critics have attacked has been the assassination scene and the Soviets saying that they weren't responsible for it, but it doesn't mean there wasn't a document that exists. Now, I don't know if a document has been found that proves that, but that could be one of the things he's talking about. But even so, I would not be surprised if there was a document like that how it exists. So, yeah, I don't think that the fans of history one is quite warranted. So.
Yeah, and especially with, I mean, one of my favorite parts was the use of how they did use real footage. The assassination attempt scene is just done so well, and it's really cool. It cuts back and forth between the actor and then real footage from all those cameras that were standing there outside the hotel. Yeah. No, I mean, here's the thing. There'll be a lot of critique, but I think it ultimately draws people back to, I want to see it for myself. And when you have, again, viewers giving it a 98% rating, yeah. How can you argue with that? Yeah.
And if you want to be a fan of history, you can certainly read Dr. Kengor's book on it.
Yep.
So.
and many books. We have in front of us here, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, we have God and Ronald Reagan, which is the book that the director was he asked Dr. Kengor for the movie rights to, but then Dr. Kengor said, this is back in 2004, he said, I'm working on a book that I think would make an even better movie. So, yes, much history you can read. Our last one we have, Matthew, I'm sorry, it's a last name I can't pronounce, but director Sean McNamara attempts to stretch a $25 million budget into a $100 million looking film, resulting in a $2.50 bargain basement quality release. Wow, they're really hitting the director for, I don't know, what's your...
I mean, I've seen movies with really bad quality that just takes you out of the film, and I didn't get that with the Reagan movie.
No, I think this is a testament. Let's take out the end part, resulting in a $2.50 bargain basement quality release. It's done really well in the box office. It's still in theaters for a month. I would say it's a very well-made film. Just all the cinematography when they're up at the Reagan Ranch is just absolutely beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And inspiring. And
the acting's phenomenal. There was no point where I was taken out.
So
from
if
that.
we take out the end part of this, I would say they did incredibly well with the $25 million budget, which is no thanks to Hollywood. This is, and Dr. Kengor has talked about this too, thanks to finally getting some conservative donors on board and getting people to support this project. His biggest thing was that conservatives need to be involved in the arts and media and entertainment and want to create beautiful works like this that are not fueled by a leftist agenda. But I would say I think he did an incredibly good job working with what he had, everything that was thrown at them, COVID, everything. And really, I mean, got very well-known actors and actresses that did an incredible job. I don't know. What's your
No, I think they got a great job with the cast. They did a good job making the movie. The film looked good. Like, I didn't have any issues with that at all. So, yeah, I don't... At no point was the quality a problem for me at all during it. And I think the audience score is a testament to that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's... Yeah, I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to see this movie in theaters, and that I'm sure that it will be out. That'll be the next thing, I guess, to see where it goes streaming, what's it on, and I hope that it's just really accessible to everyone because it's a really incredible movie. Yes, it is inspiring. I don't think that's a bad thing. Yes, it is feel good, but it also has many moments that do say, oh, you know, that was not so much of a great moment, especially Iran-Contra, I think, in there is a little bit. But at the same time, we'll say, you know, he didn't have the same scandals as many other presidents in recent years. I mean, even Bill Clinton had, like, this movie, he was a different type of president. Yeah, and I think it's just a tremendous, again, one of my favorite parts is that just weaving in God and the divine plan throughout that, which is a very Dr. Kengor phrase. I don't know. Did you have any other favorite parts?
Definitely the way they portrayed his debates. I mean, mixing in real footage with that was just because I'm a big fan of. I've watched all the Reagan debates and I'm a big fan of them. I think they're an accurate portrayal of what a presidential debate should look like.
Yeah.
So just seeing that on the big screen was definitely just a big thing. It's like, oh, this is what it used to be like. Yeah, so I really enjoyed. I thought it was a good movie. So
yeah.
No,
it's great. Okay, should we give our percentage scores?
Yeah. What do you think? What would you put it at?
Okay. I would say I would go along with the audience score. I would say 98%. My one little thing is it was slightly confusing to me. We've mentioned John Voight as a KGB agent narrating, which I thought was very cool. The one part that was a little tough for me was that, again, for those of you who haven't seen this might be slightly confusing, but he is telling a modern day Russian politician, a young Russian politician, about Reagan, and that line just didn't fully connect for me. It took a second to realize, it says present day on the movie. It took a second for me to figure out. I think John Voight narrating like that was fine with me, but that was the one part that was a little tricky for me, was just tracking he's telling this young modern day, we'd say 2024 Russian politician, and I just didn't quite follow that line all the way through. I think maybe we're assuming that by the end that young Russian politician wanted to be, was inspired maybe like Reagan, but that line I think kind of dropped off. But I'd say the rest of it, beautiful cinematography, beautiful use of all of his life. I loved how it highlighted the behind the scenes private life, and just I think is an incredible book to movie transition that was done very well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'd probably put it somewhere around the 98% mark as well, for all the reasons you stated. I don't really think I had any big issues with the movie. I will admit that the whole thing with following the modern Russian politician was a little confusing because at one point I was like, is this supposed to be Vladimir Lenin or Vladimir Putin? Not Lenin.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, and then I was like, oh, wait, modern day, so I guess probably not him. Yeah. So that would probably be I would agree with you on that. That was a little slightly confusing. Yeah, but this movie has made a lot of people upset in Hollywood, specifically the critics. And I think it's just a pretty big, obvious statement as to the bias in it. And we've seen other media companies putting out media like this and them getting trashed at box offices. Daily Wire's done a whole bunch of stuff with that. And I think this is another good example of what conservatives can do in media and make a success and have a successful movie despite the critics rating it so lowly.
No. Absolutely. Well, we just want to remind you one more time to make sure that you see the Reagan movie in theaters before it leaves theaters near you. Look out for streaming opportunities and just be sure to, if you'd like to read the Reagan the Crusader book, we'll have a link below to the republished version of Dr. Ken Gore's book. But we're so glad you joined us today.
Yep, so this has been Liberty Mail Podcast with the Institute for Faith and Freedom, and I'm Ashby Abernathy.
I'm Katie Kenline.
Make sure you like and subscribe on all relevant medias, and that's all we got for you today.
We'll see you next time.
For more information on Liberty Mail or the Institute for Faith and Freedom, visit faithandfreedom.com.